In this video, we're looking at a sewn bind off that you can use in 1x1 ribbing to make it look as if your stitches wrap around the bind off edge. This is a stretchy bind off. It uses more yarn than some, so you want a tail that is about 4 times the length of the stitches that you're going to be binding off. So make sure you have a lot of yarn left on your tail. So there are 3 setup steps before we get started, and that first one you just saw was to enter the first stitch purlwise and pull the yarn through, leaving that stitch on the needle. And then I'm going to bring my needle from back to front between stitch 1 and 2 on the needle. And the last step is to enter that second stitch as if to knit, but push the needle through to the back of the fabric. So you're going right through the center of that stitch and just pulling your yarn through to the back of the fabric. Now that we have the setup steps done, we're going to repeat the same 5 steps over and over until we run out of stitches. So you're going to remove the first stitch on the needle knitwise. Now the second stitch on the needle I'm entering purlwise, but leaving this stitch on and pulling the yarn through. Step 3, I'm going to enter that first stitch on the needle purlwise and remove that stitch from the needle. And then bring the needle from back to front between stitch 1 and stitch 2. The last step is to enter that second stitch knitwise right through the center of the stitch and push that needle from front to back, pulling the yarn through to the back of the work. And you can see that I am pulling that yarn a little bit tight as I go along. That just keeps your edge neat. It's a stretchy bind off, so you don't have to worry too much about getting this too tight. You can pull that reasonably snug just to keep a clean edge. But now you're just going to watch me do several rounds through these 5 steps, so you can just keep watching until you get the hang of it, and then in the end I will show you what we do with the final 2 stitches that are left over. If you prefer to see written instructions on how to do this, you can look in the description below the video. Sometimes that helps me to see it written out, but I know some of us are visual learners as well. And again, this is that last step in the 5 steps of repeat. And each time we go through these 5 steps, we're binding off 2 stitches. Starting over the first step, you remove that first stitch knitwise and enter stitch 2 purlwise. Then you remove the first stitch purlwise and bring your needle from the back of the work to the front between stitch 1 and 2. And lastly, you enter right through the center of that second stitch and push through to the back of the work. And we'll just keep doing this until we make it all the way around to our last 2 stitches. Okay, we're coming up on the end of our row of stitches to be bound off. And then I'll talk you through what we do with the stitches that are left over. And there's one more full repeat to do here, so we're starting that last repeat. Knit off, purl on the second stitch, Purl that first stitch off. Bring your needle from back to front between stitches 1 and 2. And then enter the second stitch knitwise and push through to the back of the fabric. So that leaves you with 2 stitches, and you can't complete a full repeat of those 5 steps, so what we do with these last 2 stitches is to knit the first one off and purl the last one off. And pull that yarn through and snug it up. And then you'll just take your tail and weave it in just like you do with any other bind off. But here we have a stretchy bind off where the stitches wrap around to the back side and create a neat edge.